State Department of Education Commission Committee. Cloud, good to see you here this morning. All right, Dr. Burton, we will get started at your lead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If the committee permits, our chairman, Mr. Charles McClellan, will make opening comments.
Thank you, Dr. Burton. First of all, on behalf of the State Board of Education, we would like to thank each committee member for all that you do in allowing us to come and present our priorities as well as our fiscal year budget for next year. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the vice chairs, co-chairs, I should say, Lieutenant Governor Bryant and Speaker Billy McCoy. We realize the task that you all have in trying to divide monies in a tough economic time. And on behalf of the board, as I made mention, we want to make sure that you understand as individuals that we definitely understand the task that you have in hand. And again, thanks for all that you do. But also like to thank the staff of each committee member as well as your colleagues in working with the Department of Education to make things better for kids in our state. We realize at times that we do not thank those people who really do a lot of the legwork, so we would like to thank those as well. I'd like to thank those people that are here today in support of public education. Without that, it would make our task much greater. I would like to take just a minute or two, if you would allow, to go over our accountability results. We feel that we have made great progress over the last few years with our new accountability model. If you remember, a few years ago, we went to a new accountability model where we had ratings of 1 to 5, with 1 being low, 5 being high, and we changed to an accountability model that entailed a much stricter labeling for our district. I would like to get into, just for a moment, some of the results of that accountability model. We added one more star district to our star district status. We had 3 last year. We added one more, giving us 4 for 2011. 12 more star schools, for a total of 65. 54% of our district were successful and above. 59% of our schools were successful and above. In 2010, there were 6 failing districts. In 2011, we only have 2. The number of failing schools for 2010 is 29. That number is now 11. We feel that that is a great step in the right direction in bringing our state off of the bottom in education. And I'd like to mention, too, some of the results from our schools that's at risk. 28 of the 34 was removed from the list. 24 of the 28 scored double digits. And this is all secured by our test data that was received in the spring of the year. 5 of the 2 at-risk schools that was listed as failing is now off of the list. 17 of the at-risk have moved 2 or more accountability labels up the ladder from the failing status. Not going to take any more time. And with that being said, I would like to turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Burton.
Dr. Burton. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go fairly quickly in the budget. I know that there are time constraints that you're dealing with. A couple of things I do want to mention because they relate very closely to the budget. I think most of you, we had a conversation with last year about Common Core. Common Core is the new structure guiding curriculum frameworks across the country. It adds a great deal of rigor to what's happening in schools. During this past year, we provided training to over 2,500 teachers, and we spent a great deal of time with 487 K-2 teachers that went back and trained in the schools, and they are implementing K-2 standards this current year. As I've said to staff and I have said to the press, and I think this is an important point, the kindergartner sitting in a classroom today is the first student that will come under Common Core assessment as a third grader. Having said that, as I move through the budget, one of the things I'm going to present to you today is a request for some additional funding to support Common Core. This is an opportunity for us to do it right in Mississippi. It's an opportunity for us to build a base. Supporting that will be a new national assessment system called PARC. And one of the opportunities that was extended to us was an opportunity to be on the board of PARC. We were selected as the rural state to be a member of the board of PARC. The good news for you as a legislative body is that as a member of PARC, our teachers will be part of the piloting process for the assessments. So those national assessments will begin to be piloted in Mississippi in 2013. The other thing that I'm going to speak about in our budget, and this you have some level of awareness of, but we will, by January, have 60 new superintendents in this state. We will turn over a third of the superintendents in Mississippi this year through the process. You have people moving into superintendent's positions based on elections this year who have absolutely no experience to be superintendents. You will see, and I will talk briefly as I present our budget request, a request for funds to establish a superintendent's academy in this state to prepare people to move into those positions. I think if we do not address the issue of leadership, we will never be successful in education in our state. If you'll go to your budget book, which we provided for you as we do each year, what you'll find, and I'll move through this again very quickly, Governor, you're going to see the visions and mission and goals of the State Board of Education. Those are, at this time, under study by the board. We are have worked with Dr. Mark Tucker, the gentleman that has secured the work, did the work around standing on the shoulders of giants, and we are working to incorporate that into the strategic plan. So you're going to see a plan being revised, both in terms of goals and strategies. If you'll go to page 7, you see our budget request, our legislative priorities, if you will, as we present to you each year. I will move from there, with your permission, to page 9. Page 9 presents the heart of the budget request for the Mississippi Department of Education. If you start at the top and you note that we are requesting full funding of MAEP, this is consistent with the statute that the board requests full funding. I will preface that or follow that by saying that this board and the administration understands the current financial climate of the state of Mississippi. We appreciate what you've done for us in the past. We appreciate the efforts that you have made toward achieving the highest level of funding for MAEP possible. If you apply the formula and you assume that last year we had been funded at full level, the amount of funding for MAEP increases by $12.8 million. However, last year you had an underfunding of $237 million, so the actual request for MAEP for fiscal year that we're talking about is $250,212,757. The other agency needs that I'd like to speak to very briefly, if you'll recall, those of you that worked carefully with the budget, this year we were able to reappropriate $4.5 million. $2 million of those dollars went to general education operations. $2.5 million of those dollars went to national board certification. And let me remind you that the money that was available, the $4.5 million, came from, and those of you who work closely with the budget will recall, we had an overestimate on national board certification that amounted to about $2.9 million. What you're seeing, and you'll see that in our request for this year, national board is kind of leveled out. You've reached a plateau, it's kind of leveled out, and I think a good bit of that's based on uncertainty of funding for it, and so teachers are reluctant to move into the national board process. We also had $1.6 million that was available from the general operations of the Department of Education. This was based on the fact that we had held back funding pending further cuts that did not occur, and we had also worked to maximize the resources that were available. So we are requesting the replacement of the reappropriated funds of $4.5 million. We are requesting an increase of $2 million in Educable Child. The education chairs and appropriation chairs realize this has been a difficult one that we've dealt with for a number of years. We are requesting, as I indicated, $3 million for Common Core. We're requesting $2.5 million for a Superintendent's Academy. You see an increase of $3.7 million for Chickasaw, and you realize that's formula driven. That's simply the formula and what it calls for. $120,000 are for the incremental salary increases of the teachers working in special schools of the state. The last two I'll make comments about. These are the funds that have been diverted in the case of the teacher supply funds, I think probably for the last 6 to 7 years possibly. And in the case of the public school building funds, those probably have been diverted out for the last 8 years or more. We continue to put those in the budget because we feel like that as they have been diverted, we need to bring that back. So you look at a total of $50 million for other requests and policy needs. A total increase of 13%. If you'll bear with me, of that 13%, 10.8% of that is MAEP, formula driven. 1.7% of those funds are the funds that were diverted, asking for those back. Chickasaw is 0.2%, and the MDE increase, which would support the Superintendent's Academy and Educable Child, along with Common Core, add another 0.3%. In anticipation of a question, Governor, the Emergency School Loan Fund right now has a balance of $3.5 million in it. We do anticipate some additional repayments from both Tate County and Indianola, which would increase the amount of funding in the Emergency Loan Fund, which would indicate to you as policymakers, we probably will not have to look at that as a budget issue for the coming year. That's one that we typically do have to look at. And that, Governor, covers our request. Now, if the members would like for us to go in depth with the budget page by page, we're prepared to do that, or we're prepared to take questions.
Chairman Brown has a question.
A couple of questions, Dr. Burton. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. The $12 million increase in MAEP is formula driven. Now, when MAEP was passed in subsequent years, a number of people have had concerns that we're going to have a runaway formula that is going to be running out of control because of the inflation factors and all that. But that $12 million represents about 0.5% increase in MAP.
That is correct.
That is correct. So we don't have a runaway formula that's out of control.
Yes. What you're seeing in the formula is what you would expect to see. As expenditures go down, the formula will. As expenditures would go up, you would see a slight increase in the formula. But the formula is fairly consistent. The formula, as you know, Mr. Chairman, has been around now since actually 97, 98. There have been adjustments in the formula, but this formula, most of us understand at this point.
When's the next year that we actually go through and recalculate?
I believe that's 2013. Where's Todd?
It's FY 2015. It will be a complete recalculation.
Okay, so for the next 3 or 4 years, it's fixed plus the cost of inflation.
That's correct.
Textbook adoption. You have a textbook adoption on reading this year. Is that next year for 2013? Is that correct? Do we know?
I'm going to answer you honestly. I don't know. Mr. Chairman.
You don't have a specific increase line item here for textbooks?
No, sir. The one issue we have with textbooks, and we did not reflect it here, the issue we're dealing with textbooks right now are textbooks for visually impaired students. The cost of those books has escalated to a point it's not uncommon now to see a visually impaired textbook at $20,000 to $25,000.
Would you say that again so everybody understands that?
$20,000 to $25,000
Per textbook?
per textbook. And that's because those textbooks, in some cases, that's a single textbook being translated by a single individual, and we have no control over it. We have to go into the market and literally try to find someone who will translate textbooks in the braille.
Can you tell us, in the recent downturn in the economy and with underfunding of MAP, in terms of jobs out there, teachers and non-certified people and others, based on the information you have, how many job losses, I don't mean unfilled positions, but people that have actually lost jobs, non-renewals or whatever, not people that have retired. Do you have any idea what those numbers look like?
No, sir.
I think y'all did a number at one time. It was like 800 teachers in total, 2,200 people or 2,000 people or something like that.
Okay, on page 11. Thank you, Greg. It's not in here. What we do have on page 11 is some information on staffing changes due to budget cuts, and these deal with non-renewal and other staff other than teachers that were non-renewed.
As a result of the underfunding of MAP, the formula, do you have any data that shows us what local districts have done in terms of raising ad valorem taxes? Have there been raises?
Yes, sir. Those have been pretty much across the state. What you found in terms of raising ad valorem taxes over the past 2 years is that particularly in districts that have elected boards and elected superintendents, you saw a great deal of reluctance to do that, and you saw a more significant reduction in staffing based upon that. The districts that were in a position, they weren't capped out and had the opportunity to raise millage, did in fact raise millage. So those cuts, essentially, to follow what you're saying, were passed down to the local level.
And if a district was at the cap, like Jackson Public School District was above the cap and they couldn't raise local taxes, what do?
They cut personnel, they cut services. There's no other choice. You have to present a balanced budget, so they made a decision to make the cuts.
So classroom sizes could increase or whatever the impact might be?
Yes, sir. I think that, reluctant to say this, but I will say it because I think it's factual to the extent that we can determine factuality. We saw a slowdown in the growth in terms of academic achievement this year. We had great growth on the lower end, as the chairman alluded to, and we had pretty good growth around the mean. Those are two areas that you expect to see growth. We did not see growth in other places, and I think some of that's attributable to you're seeing class sizes go up. You have less teacher assistants in the classrooms. People are struggling. But as I think you'll hear from our vice chair today, the folks out in schools have worked very hard to make the situation work.
I believe out in Clinton, they non-renewed or eliminated 47 people out there,
yes,
if I remember correctly.
There has been a significant impact. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge there has been a significant impact. We'd also be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that the folks out in the school districts have worked hard to make it work and do it in a positive manner, understanding the commitment that this body has had and the work this body has done.
Now, in terms of the department, I'm a lot worried about what's going on with the department in terms of your ability to do the job that we ask you to do, and I know you're concerned about it. Can you talk a little bit about that, in particular the additional stress we put on you in terms of conservatorships and the request you're going to have to make for help? And let's be open about it, because this budget committee needs to hear that.
I'll be happy to be open about that, Mr. Chairman. I have talked to both chairs. Our state chairman has talked. We're hopeful to come to the legislature this year with some recommendations that would move us away from conservatorship. We have moved school districts. We've had success. But as I've openly said to our chairs, our success has been from the schoolhouse door in. We are unable to fix many of the things that take place in those communities. But it has become one of the most consuming things happening in the Mississippi Department of Education. It has really pulled us away from doing the things that we need to be doing to work with school districts. So what we anticipate proposing to you is a process of returning schools back to local communities, but with an understanding if those schools fail again, that it is time to abolish those schools and look at how you reconfigure something that works within those communities. Because very clearly, the success we are having is within the schools, and our struggles are outside of the schools within the communities. And I hope I said that in a way that you can understand. We're very proud of what we've accomplished. We really are. We presented to you. We are having an impact. But that impact is coming at a time when we are pulling things away that we need to be doing in those parts of the agency.
Thank you, Senator Hughes.
And Governor, Todd, in some of these communities you're talking about that have had historic difficulty, there's a cultural indifference to education, quality education. Are you seeing a change in the attitude of these communities as far as coming on board and making a difference and getting involved and fixing those things before the kids get in the door?
What we see in those communities is the same thing you see in every community in the state. If you're working with the parents, they want what's best for their children, and they want good schools, and they want their children to have great opportunities. What you see as a barrier to that, in many cases, the power and different power structures within those communities who are vying for control. And then that, in some cases, overwhelms the good intention of many people to have really good schools. And that's part of the struggle. So it uses, how do you change that power structure? Because even the parents and the people in the community who want it to be successful and who are willing to make great sacrifices and work hard, they still can't achieve that because of either long-term or long-standing, not long-term, long-standing power structures or different groups, and I think our chairman would agree with this because he receives me in those phone calls, different groups vying for control of that power structure within those communities.
Well, they're missing the whole point with respect to education a lot of times. My question is, you mentioned the Superintendent's Academy, which sounds pretty exciting. What do you envision an academy doing that a lot of the professional development organizations that your superintendents participate in today as far as professional development, what would that do that these don't provide?
The analogy I would use there for you is what we've done in low performing schools. What we started doing in low performing schools approximately 2 years ago was recognizing that they were doing a whole lot of planning and a whole lot of development of documents and not a whole lot of things that focused in the classroom and dealt with the skills and the job of being a better teacher and improving performance for children. So we became much more structured and focused in what we were doing in low-performing schools and helping them to do the very job they had to do and do it better. What we would propose to do in Superintendent's Academy, we're not concerned with awarding college credit for it, and we're not concerned with degrees. We're concerned with what are the day-to-day skills of being a superintendent that we need to impart to these people as quickly as we can, and preferably before they become superintendents. And the example I would use is the challenge of working in a mutually supportive environment with the board. There is a great deal of knowledge and skill that's required of an individual to work with the board. And in no place does that take place now until people are already in the job and it becomes an experience gained under 5. And we would propose to do that, those kind of things, Senator Hughes. Work on how do you work with a board? How do you go about establishing a learning environment within a school district and advance that learning environment within a school district? So I guess my answer to you would be very experience-based, very practical kinds of skills that it takes to be successful.
One final part of the question. Tom, we're often told while the superintendents are crucial to the function of their particular districts, the real issue comes in at the principal level, where the difference is made in schools. Do you have anything along those lines for a principal's academy, or what is in place, what do you need to do?
Well, interesting. Thank you for the question. Interesting enough, we're just finishing a wrap-up of a total redesign of all the principal preparation programs in the state. The institutions have submitted They're redesigned programs. Their redesigned programs are required not only to address the kinds of things I was talking about, those redesigned programs are required to also submit how they will deal with a year of internship of those individuals under a master principal, so that once they come into these jobs, they have the skills necessary to do those jobs.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Governor. Briefly, Tom, can you give 82 counties in the state of Mississippi the Sue Matheson formula? Most ethnically diverse, free lunches, traumatized children in trailers, and they have, tell this body what they have consistently done. If we could do that for the rest of the state, Governor, that's where you want to go.
Pass Christian is consistently a star school district, and I do not remember the exact number Dr. Matheson said at the last board meeting of schools across the state that have visited her district. It's a double-digit, very high number. But the secret of what they do is a lot of hard work, a lot of planning, and most importantly, they treat every child as an individual. They literally monitor and track every child in that school district as an individual.
Great work there. We have other school districts, I know, but Pass Christian is one to be held up as an example. I understand Hazelhurst is doing much better with the principal there. There's some great examples of school districts in tough socio-economic areas that are doing tremendous work.
And Governor, I might add, as the chairman spoke to me just a moment ago, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about our parents and parental involvement and parental engagement. Where you find successful schools, you see that over and over and over.
Mr. Chairman, Carmichael.
Thank you, Governor. I'm going to go over a couple things, Dr. Burton, and I appreciate, working with you has been fun, and it's been rewarding to me personally and to this state. So I appreciate what you and your people are doing and what our State Board of Education is doing. I want to go a couple things real quick. Common Core and the MCT2. We're phasing out MCT2 and going to Common Core. There's a timeline, I guess. I know you're going, first K through 2 now, and what will that eventually do to MCT2, and will that save us any money?
I do not think in the long term it's going to save us any money, but the good news I think I can tell you from being on the park board is it's not going to cost us any more money, and we're going to have assessments and resources that we've never had available for the children in the state. We're going to, for the first time in my career, have really outstanding assessments that do not focus on whether a child can fill in a bubble sheet and do recognition and recall. They're going to focus on, can a child apply the knowledge, and can they make decisions around the knowledge that they have that results in the correct answer. So that's going to happen. to your question about replacing MCT2, we will start the piloting of what PARC is the new acronym. We'll start piloting of PARC assessments in this state in 2013. We will be at a point of full implementation by 2015. So by 2015, you'll see MCT2 drop off. Our goal is simply to continue the current model, but bring in new assessments into the model. The model will work just as well with the new assessments as it does with MCT2. So the challenge we have, and thus the $3 million request, is we have to train teachers to be ready for Common Core and PARC.
What I'm getting at, the other side of the money, that wasn't as big a deal as this question seemed to make it, but what Common Core to the individual, the regular individual out in our state, basically, if I understand it right, is what the Common Core of this nation would be, what that child should be, the core knowledge they should have at that particular age and grade. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And the best example I can use for you today is, if you think of the curriculum in the United States today, it's a mile wide and about this thick. And what happens is a child is taught and retaught and taught and retaught the same content, in some cases as many as 7 times. Common Core moves away from that. Common Core moves to, you teach it and you teach it at a much greater depth, but then you move to the next point of knowledge, and you teach it and you teach it at much greater depth. So you expand the base of knowledge, you take out what is very much a repetitive nature of teaching, but you are in a situation where a child in Pass Christian and a child in DeSoto County are going to be taught the same things, but that would be the same thing that's being taught in Alabama and Kentucky and other states across the country. It is a common core.
Switching gears a little bit on did you say 60 new superintendents?
That's what we're projecting right now, somewhere between 55